Well, we've got these thunderstorms rolling through Kansas City this morning. Good morning. It is great to be here on 95.7 FM, KCMO, and nothing severe in these thunderstorms. Just good old spring thunderstorms around Kansas City as we kick off what should be a fairly active week. Looks like the weekend's going to be filled with rain, especially on Sunday. But these thunderstorms this morning should be out of here by, give or take, 8 o'clock this morning.
Yeah, some wet roads, so just be a little bit safe.
Yes, definitely want to take your time this morning as you're getting to the office, but these will be gone within the next couple of hours. Now, unfortunately, the story around Maryland man will not be gone in the next couple of hours. Instead, the media is just absolutely obsessed with this story. You have senators flying down to El Salvador to try to, in their eyes, rescue a man who is not an American citizen from a prison, to bring him back home and to try to make a political statement. And, of course, I use the word home in a relative sense. He is not a citizen of this country. In fact, he's somebody who has quite a bit of history that we are now learning about. And that's something else here that you look at and you say to yourself, do you really want to hitch your political party to this guy's wagon? Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Do you want to do this? It was about a half decade ago when you hitched your wagon as a political party to George Floyd. I'm not sure you want to make that same mistake again. Because this guy, I mean, there was a lot of stuff there with George Floyd I'm not going to bring back to the surface right now. But you look at where we're at today and some of what's coming out with this guy's history, like he was a domestic abuser. And his wife, who now one political party is propping up as this sympathetic figure, was the one who was calling the police on this guy multiple times over the last few years. Not like a one-off, like, this might have happened. Like multiple calls on domestic violence. That's just the latest chapter in this book that we're learning about this individual who now finds himself down, of course, in a Salvadoran prison. So this story, I mean, it's crazy to me, too, because I really think that they had Trump. They didn't have him, but they were actually making some headway when they were focused on the economy. And by they, I mean the Democrats who obviously want to regain power in Washington, D.C. They were actually effectively saying, hey, I don't know if these tariffs are going to work. These tariffs are horrible. I mean, that's what they were saying, right? And the polling was suggesting over the last couple of weeks that there was a softening of support for Trump on economic issues in particular. And that is always issue number one for voters. Where Trump remained the strongest over the last couple of months and still does when it comes to his policy is on the southern border. And just the border in general. And the way that Joe Biden royally screwed up the immigration issue in this country. So suddenly they find this individual and they make him their knight in shining armor. And they focus obsessively on defending an illegal immigrant under the guise of due process. That's just what they're using for their argument. But that's really at the core not what this is about. It's about a political establishment that spent 4 years turning a blind eye to illegal immigration because, frankly, they saw political benefits from it. So now they've used this guy and they've propped him up, and they're going to continue to prop him up for the foreseeable future as some type of hero, as their George Floyd 2.0, and it's a major miss on their part. Who would have thought that Emmanuel Cleaver here in Kansas City would have had more of the pulse on where the Democratic Party should be at right now than the leaders who are just pumping up this story of Abrego Garcia? At least Cleaver's out there doing chants in front of various federal buildings and trying to rally around tariffs. He's tweeting about tariffs all day yesterday. He's more in touch than the leadership in his own party. I mean,
you mustard moo.
I can't believe it. But here we are. So last night you had Tim Walz out there. And Tim Walz, of course, amazingly was almost the vice president in this country, which is just wild to me. I mean,
he's a nut job.
I can't believe it. He's out there last night, and he's on MSNBC with Rachel Maddow. Gosh, I do it every time. Sorry, it was Chris Hayes. I always screw those two up. They look the same to me. They got the same haircut and the same glasses, so I don't know what to tell you. But anyway, you had Tim Walz on there last night with Chris Hayes, and he was talking about this story, and here is what he had to say.
I have come to understand what Donald Trump, what pops into his head and he says, he's going to carry it out. Once again, he talked about the tariffs. He talked about, he's going to deport people. And this whole thing with Mr. Abreu Garcia, it's that old wisdom and terrifying is if you're not speaking up for this man, there will be no one left to speak up for you.
Let me get that straight, Tim. Give me a little rocket kick while you're at it there, buddy. If we don't speak up for this man, nobody will be left to speak up for me or you right now here on KCMO Talk Radio. That is what the man who was nearly the vice president of the United States had to say last night on MSNBC. That is next level. Even I didn't think, if you want to support the guy, support the fact that, the due process angle here, the facilitation of his return is something that is not being handled in good faith by the administration. There's an argument, okay? You can make it. We've talked about both sides of this whole deal. There's no doubt about it. There is a gray area on what facilitating his return actually looks like. But, of course, Tim Walz can't just say that, right? He can't stick to that script. He can't stay in that lane. He's now got to say that every American who doesn't stand up for this guy has to be careful because they're coming for you next. And that's where that's where you sit there and you say, man, these guys and gals can't get out of their own way. They do not understand the moment that we find ourselves in. But it's also very much par for the course. They just, every single time, they're taking it way too far to the left. It's like they can't help themselves, John. It's unbelievable.
I don't know what happened to the joy they were selling us.
Yeah, that was a fun moment. Brat Summer back in August. Mm-hmm. Remember that? Kamala? Yeah, I don't know what happened to the joy and the Brat Summers and things like that. Now it's like stand up for a suspected MS-13 gang member in the country illegally. And if you don't do that, well, you better look over your shoulder because Trump's coming for you next.
I'm Googling a Maryland wife beater, but I'm not coming up with this story here.
Yeah, that's amazing, one, right? Yeah, it's interesting how...
Me too.
Yes.
Et cetera.
Well, you're not meeting the narrative now, are you? You're not fitting it. No, not how it works, man. It's unbelievable. So we're kicking it off here on what will be a busy Thursday. Harris Faulkner from Fox News will join me just after 7 o'clock this morning. Mayor Lucas, of course, will be in the 7:30 slot. And old Kid Rock, he's got his tickets. He's coming to T-Mobile this weekend, and we are going to be giving away those Robert James Ritchie tickets at 7:45 this morning on KCMO 95.7 FM. We're always streaming on the KCMO Talk Radio app. Now, coming up, the Kansas City Star had a big headline piece last night. And that headline piece is something we told you about like 36 hours before they ran it as a headline story. I'll tell you what that was coming up on 95.7 FM, KCMO Talk Radio. I couldn't believe it last night. I'm getting ready for the show. I'm looking up the local news stories of the day that I might have missed over the last few hours. And I go to the Kansas City Star homepage. And the headline story is this: Royals are again evaluating North Kansas City as a possible stadium site, per sources. And I'm like, whoa, who was your source? Us on Monday? Like 48 hours ago when we were talking about this on Monday morning? My goodness. Way to go, guys. Welcome to the party. Hey, there you go, Kansas City Star. I guess when you print the paper in Des Moines to get it down to Kansas City, your news cycle is also 2 days behind. What are your sources? You can't say our sources tell us, when you've had myself and Kevin and multiple other people talk about this in the last 2 days. Yeah. I mean, you had literally a member of the Clay County Commission on the show talking about this on Tuesday morning, I guess it was. Yeah. And they're coming out on Wednesday like, our sources tell us.
I know things.
Yeah. Way to go, Star. Nice job. Excellent, excellent work. I mean, I couldn't believe it. And then I'm like, okay, maybe there's something in here that's going to be different, that's going to be, a unique little nugget that will stand out above the rest. But I know you're going to be surprised by this. The answer is no.
Talk about a bombshell.
The Royals have evaluated the possibility of a stadium and surrounding ballpark district in North Kansas City. Multiple sources told the Star. Wow. That's it, huh? That's what you
the
got.
land's mostly clear, so you're not putting a coffee shop out of business. So
no, that's true.
That would be the angle.
Yeah. Says here it's unclear when their renewed interest in the site north of the river or to what degree they're actually considering it now, but multiple sources tell the Kansas City Star the Royals have talked with the Merriman family, which controls a site encompassing nearly 100 acres in North KC. The Royals also previously tasked developers to study the site. Whether anything new comes of those talks remains to be seen. Wow. Very good intel. Well done there, everybody. Nice job. Now, this, of course, comes on the heels of a very interesting conversation that Kevin Kietzman had yesterday with Jackson County Independence attorney Phil Lavoda, who also found himself on Fox 4 last night. Now, Kietzman had the interview first. It is up on the podcast. Just search for Kevin Kietzman. You'll find it there. But Phil wants to be the guy, or is willing to be the guy, to replace Frank White if Frank White does ultimately get recalled. And that remains to be seen whether or not that will happen. Apparently the votes are there, but what we do not know yet is whether or not every single vote is going to be counted and whether or not the people who have the signatures will release the votes because, as was discussed yesterday on KCMO, apparently those folks are owed $150,000 and nobody wants to foot the bill. So that's a problem in and of itself. But this guy, Phil Lavoda, longtime, lifelong Jackson County resident, was also on Fox 4 last night with Jonathan Ketz, and here's part of that conversation.
Before we interviewed Gary and Bob at Chapels, we interviewed former Jackson County Democratic Committee Chairman Phil Lavoda. He's still supportive of a new Royals ballpark going in that county instead. Lavoda believes he could work with Missouri Governor Mike Kehoe on this issue. The governor's office wouldn't comment on Wednesday.
I think Governor Kehoe is more supportive of a North Kansas City site than a downtown KCMO site.
I will say today he is with Frank White as county executive. I agree. If Frank White is out and he has a partner in Jackson County, he already has the infrastructure. They already have a sports authority, and you can put it together. There's been a roadblock for Governor Kehoe, and that's been Jackson County and the executive specifically, not the legislature, but the executive.
Now, I think there's a couple things that I want to take you behind the scenes on here on this. And this is all just backstory in terms of understanding the full picture of this individual, Phil Lavoda, some of the history with his family, how that might tie into what Kehoe is thinking right now. All that remains to be seen. But Phil's brother is a guy named Paul who was in the Missouri State Senate. And Paul resigned from the Missouri State Senate back in August of 2015. He was a Democrat, and basically the Democratic leadership asked him to resign. And that was because of a female legislative intern who filed a Title IX civil rights complaint making allegations of sexual harassment against him. And then shortly after going public, another intern came forward publicly with photographs of inappropriate text messages that she had received from the senator nearly 5 years earlier. Now, he maintains his innocence through all this, Paul does, but Mike Kehoe was in the Senate when this was going on. So Mike Kehoe has familiarity with at least a part of the family. The idea that Mike Kehoe is like just all ready and roaring to work with Phil, well, I don't get any evidence of that. In fact, I tried to get the governor on the show today or tomorrow. I was told Friday would work. then Friday wouldn't work, and then today was going to work, and then today was not going to work. So now we're looking at maybe next week. My sense here, and listen, we have a good relationship with the governor. My sense here is that he does not want to get caught up and in the mud, for lack of a better word, on some of this pettiness that may be going on right now. That's my sense. I can't confirm it. That's just my gut feeling on this whole thing. The barriers to the state wanting to work with Jackson County are, yes, partially Frank White, but that's not it. That's not the only thing. There's a cost factor here as well. And the cost factor, and this is something that, I've heard from multiple sources, but the cost factor downtown for a Royals ballpark, well, the state ask is about double what it is in North Kansas City. And a lot of folks in Jeff City are like, well, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. To commit double the amount of state resources for one stadium location versus another that, as the crow flies, are what? A mile, 2 miles apart, whatever it might be. I mean, they're both theoretically downtown. If you want to use that verbiage, they both can have a downtown feel. So does it make sense to put in double the amount of money that could be needed for a downtown Kansas City, Missouri ballpark versus looking at that North Kansas City site? And plus, no one thinks that a Royals and Chiefs tax can pass in Jackson County. If it's a Chiefs-only tax, it has a much better chance. And Clay County could pass its own tax, obviously, for the Royals, and that would alleviate some of the financial strain of Jackson County floating both teams. That's more of where the state is at. I mean, there's no doubt that Frank's an impediment to basically everything right now in Jackson County. But the idea that Frank is the impediment and the thing that makes the county an impossible place to negotiate, that's actually not the case with the people I've spoken with. So there's so many layers to this thing that gets very deep into the weeds. And, of course, we're going to share it with you here on KCMO, what we know and where things stand. But, of course, we're not going to pull the old Basset Hound Bob trick and tell you that they're going somewhere when we know that they're maybe not. We're not going to jump the gun on anything. I promise you that much. Coming up, Harris Faulkner, 7 o'clock. Do not miss the conversation with her on KCMO Talk Radio. And next, what happened in KCK that reverberates around the region? We'll explain coming up. This conviction was 6 years in the making. Headline here, Fox 4, man found guilty for 2019 KCK bar shooting that killed 4. The story goes, a 35-year-old man was found guilty yesterday in connection to a 2019 shooting at Tequila Bar in Kansas City, Kansas, that left 4 people dead and several others injured. Hugo Villanueva Morales was found guilty of first-degree attempted murder, criminal possession of a firearm, aggravated assault, and 4 counts of aggravated battery. This was announced yesterday by the Wyandotte County District Attorney's Office. So this goes back to October of 19. I remember when we covered the story, and investigators said at the time that on October 6th of 2019, Villanueva Morales and Javier Alatorre walked into the Tequila KC bar in KCK, firing guns, killing 4 people, and wounding another 5. Investigators revealed that an earlier dispute occurred inside the bar, which later led to the shooting. And surveillance video shows Villanueva Morales and Alatorre attempting to locate someone inside Tequila KC after they returned to the bar, according to court documents. Investigators say the video also shows both men firing at people inside Tequila KC. They then fled the scene. So Alatorre was captured shortly after the shooting. But it wasn't until December of 2019 when Villanueva Morales was captured in southwest Mexico and brought back to the United States. So Alatorre was sentenced on February of 2024 to 22 years and 3 months in prison after entering a guilty plea to 4 counts of second-degree murder. Villanueva Morales is scheduled to be sentenced July 1 of 25. So I started trying to find more information on these guys. And I found some of the old stories from 2019 that I wanted to kind of refresh my memory on to figure out who these guys were, what their backgrounds were in the region. And as it goes, and I remember this once I started to refresh myself on it, but I also was realizing that some of these angles within the story didn't stand out to me at the time because the issues that we were dealing with in Jackson County were not as terrible as they had become. But these guys had criminal histories in Jackson County, Missouri. That's right. These guys had criminal backgrounds in Jackson County, Missouri, and they were basically in a tough situation where you had prosecutors saying, please do not lower the bonds on these guys. Don't do it. What happened? The judges in Jackson County did it anyway. So we'll go back here to 2019 with these two guys, Villanueva Morales and Alatorre. Alatorre in prison, sentenced about a little over a year ago. And then the other guy who was found guilty yesterday is this guy, Villanueva Morales. They killed 4 people at this bar in KCK back in 2019. But their criminal history goes back to Jackson County, Missouri. And that's where, if you're someone who's like, I don't live in Jackson County, I don't live in Kansas City, I don't care if they can't get their act together, this stuff can have impacts around the entire region. If you have bad prosecutors and awful judges who will let some of these individuals off the hook or lower their bonds, allow them to get back onto the streets, well, they could be floating around any neighborhood in the Kansas City area. Now, maybe they're more likely to be in parts of KCK than Leawood. I get it. But they could still be out driving on the roads, looking to commit crimes, and you never know where. That's why everybody in the region should want improvement from the prosecutor's office in Jackson County, and the judges make a difference. So we'll start with the guy Alatorre. Alatorre had 3 pending felony criminal cases in Jackson County related to drugs, fleeing from the police, and tampering with a motor vehicle. This was back in 2019. He served a brief stint in a Kansas prison for attempting to flee from police by driving recklessly. Last month, Alatorre, this is back in 2019, so this goes back 5.5 years now. Alatorre sought to get his bond reduced so that he could get out of jail. The prosecutor objected to his request. Good job by the prosecutor in Jackson County. I know.
Talk about a bombshell.
That's a surprise, but good job by them back at the time. The prosecutor objected to the request, saying that Alatorre was a flight risk and a danger to the community. The prosecutor said that in 2 of the 3 cases, Alatorre resisted arrest by fleeing from the police. In one case, he drove in excess of 100 miles an hour and refused to adhere to traffic signals. Prosecutors said that Alatorre at the time had committed new crimes while out on bond, and that pending cases and bond conditions had no effect on the defendant's actions. Despite the objections by the prosecutors, a judge in Jackson County granted Alatorre's request and set his bond at $3,500 without paying anything at all. The judge then released this thug, Alatorre, on his own recognizance. That is as pathetic as it gets. The judge at the time set conditions. Alatorre's bond: he must submit to random drug tests, not drive unless he's properly licensed and insured, have no contact with any law enforcement, blah, blah, blah. Well, we know how this story sadly ended. That's who these judges are allowing back onto the streets, and they're mostly terrorizing poor and working poor communities. That's what they're doing. And these judges, and not in this case, but in too many cases, the prosecutors go along with it. And by the way, there was another issue with the guy Villanueva Morales. All right, he was involved in an incident at a club on the 2800 block of Southwest Boulevard for unruly behavior in August 5th of 2019 before he was involved in these murders in October of that year. He got into a fight with a security guard there. The security guard was able to hold him down and take him into custody, but both men were bleeding as a result. This was a deputy and this guy, Villanueva Morales. Both men were bleeding, and Villanueva Morales allegedly spit blood into the face of the deputy and a witness. He was charged with third-degree assault. Court records indicate he posted a $25,000 bond the next day, and a preliminary hearing was scheduled for October 28th. He obviously never showed up to that because he was involved in this murder in KCK in early October, and then he fled to Mexico, where he got arrested in December of that year. And now yesterday is when he finally was found guilty after 5.5 years in connection to that shooting at Tequila Bar in KCK. All this stuff weaves together. Poor prosecution and awful judges in Jackson County can have impacts in other parts of the Kansas City metro and vice versa. It's just the worst offenders seem to be in KCMO and Jackson County in particular. But that's why when we talk about the crime thing, it's not exclusive and unique to just Kansas City, Missouri residents or Jackson County residents. It should matter to all of us. Because if not, these people are around the metro, they're around the region, and they're still committing crimes. Because guess what? Criminals, when you treat criminals with kid gloves, they commit more crimes. I've got 3 little kids, and I promise you, if you give them too much rope, well, they're going to get themselves into some trouble. Whether you're a parent or a grandparent, you know that all too well. You give them enough rope, they're going to get themselves into trouble. And I could give you 6 examples of that just from yesterday in the 4 o'clock hour, but we'll be here all morning. So I won't do that to you right now, as much as I would want to. We talk, quite a bit about what kind of incentives are thrown out there for business. And we just talked to the mayor about the Royals, what that may look like, how the state's going to help, how the taxpayer may end up kicking in some money, whether the taxpayer likes it or not. Now, you'll vote on it, Clay County or Jackson County. You won't on the Kansas side with these star bonds, but that's always part of the deal. I know our friends at the Show Me Institute are dead set against these incentives, and I am too. I don't like them. But they are always part of the conversation. And they're usually a part of the conversation with businesses that are building from the ground up, right? I mean, having talked to developers, especially with the cost now to build anything that has just skyrocketed the last few years, they feel it's more important than ever to get some relief, get some assistance, property tax abatements, whatever it might be. I'm not defending it inherently. I'm just saying that's what they'll argue, especially when they're building something from the ground up. And at least there you can somewhat see it. But a report came out from the Kansas City Star that a mystery company wants to move into Overland Park at the old Spring campus. So I guess it's not on the table for the Royals anymore. Oh, my goodness. That Basset Hound Bob down the dial keeps, whoo, boy, not looking like the bulldog he dubs himself, looking like the Basset Hound. I don't know what else to say there, John, but whoo, that's a bad look.
And the ironic thing would be perhaps the new tenants would be named something like Royal Technologies. Right. Whoops, wrong Royals.
Yeah. Oh, man. So the Star reports here that the project is dubbed Project Turtle. Now, we don't know who the company is, but they're dubbing it Project Turtle. I don't know if they're big Entourage fans or how they're coming up with this name, but
see what you did there.
They are calling it Project Turtle. A company from outside Kansas plans to invest $125 million to renovate and lease 420,000 square feet of existing space on the former Spring campus and employ 2,000 full-time employees with an average annual salary of $125,000, according to city documents. City has worked with the Overland Park Chamber of Commerce and the Economic Development Team and the Kansas Department of Commerce to attract Project Turtle.
I like turtles.
Yeah. Located at 119th and Null. The developer is asking for a 10-year property tax rebate on property taxes paid for its leased space. The rebate, 40% of the total taxes, would exclude property taxes that would go to Blue Valley School District and Johnson County Community College. So instead, this is all political posturing. This is all about trying to make themselves look good. All right. They're going to try to squeeze the city out of whatever tax dollars they can. But don't worry, they're going to pay the schools because that looks good, right? Don't worry. We're giving the property taxes to the schools. It's going to be okay. But instead, the rest of us will subsidize, trash and snow removal and whatever else, is not covered. Whatever else they're getting their abatements on. And all they're doing is renovating the campus. Now, I'm not saying there aren't costs associated with that. I get it. There are. But this is not building a Sprint campus or rebuilding a Sprint campus from the ground up. We're talking renovations. Is that really worth giving them that kind of an abatement? A 10-year property tax abatement on taxes paid for its leased space. Especially when, as far as I can tell, they're having a pretty tough time finding anybody to come out there. Now, you might make the argument and then say to yourself, well, that's exactly why we got to give the abatement. Well, do you realize? I mean, I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud here. But you know what kind of property tax revenue you could get if you maybe develop that into single-family homes? No, I know. No one in our Johnson County municipalities want that. If anything, they would build, 10-story apartment complexes there. But there are ways to make money. That's some of the most valuable land in the entire region. You have a ton of single-family neighborhoods anyway in the area. I don't know. Does that even cross their minds? Or is it like, no, we need to get a company there because then that gives us a reason to build more apartments somewhere else, right? I don't know. I don't get the strategy, though. I can't figure it out, to be honest. And they are saying that they can't disclose, the city is saying they cannot disclose details because the information is protected by the Kansas Open Records Act. Okay. All right. Sure. Whatever. Project Turtle is what they're calling it. I mean, it's okay, guys. Don't take yourselves too seriously, okay? It's not rocket science.
I like turtles.
Thank you. It's everybody at City Hall. Well, this was an oops. You heard Guy Benson in the tease about 15 minutes ago for his show coming up at 2 o'clock say that the narrative has rapidly changed on a couple of key national stories that have been getting a lot of attention over the last few days. And it all surrounds, in one case, what is being dubbed the Maryland Man. The Maryland Man, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who right now is in a prison in El Salvador after being deported by the Trump administration. Well, it turns out that, and this is always the case, he's not the gentle giant, to throw it back to Michael Brown. He's not the choir boy that people make him out to be. Now, does that mean that due process cannot be a part of the conversation here? No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that the people that are putting this guy on a pedestal are putting a very bad guy. Whether due process was met or not, they're putting a really bad guy on a pedestal who is believed to have alleged gang ties to MS-13, who we now know, thanks to Fox News, which obtained the written domestic violence allegations from Abrego Garcia's wife in 2021, where she alleges that he's a repeated wife beater. And wrote at the time, "I'm afraid to be close to him. I have multiple photos and videos of how violent he can be and all the bruises he has left me." In her own handwriting, she alleges that Abrego Garcia punched and scratched her on the eye, leaving her bleeding, throwing her laptop all over the floor. She writes one day that he got angry, started yelling, ripped her shirt and her shorts off, grabbed her arm, leaving marks. Also, November of 20, hit her with a work boot. August of 20, left her with a purple eye. I know that it's all about, hey, everything Trump is doing every day has to be the worst thing ever. And this is all politics, right? You got senators flying down to El Salvador for photo ops. I mean, it's just embarrassing. We talked to Harris Faulkner about this last hour. It is utterly embarrassing. You want to make a due process case, make a due process case. But, man, hanging your hat on this one and having this be the hill that you die on right now, it is so dumb politically. So dumb. And they're just handing Trump a massive gift on the issue that he's actually strongest on. Listen to this clip. This is from CNN yesterday. I'm going to play this clip for you here. You got this clip lined up for us, Mark? All right. Let's play this clip from CNN where they make it very clear Trump's stances on immigration are far more popular today than they were less than 10 years ago. And part of that is because of the amount of damage that was done during the prior administration. Here's CNN.
Deport all undocumented immigrants. Voters favoring the government trying to deport all 11 million of them. Back in 2016, just 38% of voters wanted the government to try to deport all 11 million undocumented immigrants. Compared to where we are in 2025, 56%, the majority. The American people have come a long way on this issue, much closer to Donald Trump, and I think that's a big part of the reason why Americans are increasingly saying the country is on the right track when it comes to immigration policy, and why Donald Trump's net approval rating on that issue is in the positive.
And that's why Trump's not backing down. Now, there's an argument to make that he should. Bill O'Reilly was on News Nation last night. I saw him on there with Fredo Cuomo, and they were talking about this very issue. And O'Reilly said that he would bring this guy back to the U.S. He would facilitate the return. Now, this is a gray area. Doesn't mean they have to grab him back, but they should do a better job facilitating the return. You know and I know. If Trump said to the president down there, I keep wanting to call him Bukaki, but that's because the congressman called him that the other day, Bukele. Bukele, if he said to Bukele, hey, can we get this guy back? Bukele would say, sure. Tell me when and where. He'd send him back in a heartbeat. He's not doing that because Trump is doubling down on this issue. But O'Reilly's point is bring him back so this way you don't piss off the Supreme Court. And right now, you're going to need the Supreme Court because the Democrats are using the legal system to try to beat you. That's all they've got. All they've got are these activist judges in robes, and they're trying to work this stuff up through the legal system and get it to the Supreme Court. That's the only defense mechanism they have. So Bill was like, in an effort to play nice with the Supreme Court, facilitate the guy's return, and then just go through the legal process and kick him out. That was basically his point. Not a bad thought. From a political perspective, I get it. But Trump's taken the calculated risk here that the American people are on his side on the issue and that they're not going to budge on the issue because of this one guy. And he also believes that this is making his political opponents look like utter fools. And that's not a hard thing to do right now. And he's right on that. He is making them look like fools. Even if they may have a point on the entire due process conversation, they are putting this guy on a George Floyd-esque pedestal, on a Michael Brown-esque pedestal. And you're watching this from afar and you're like, this is the hill you're going to die on with this guy. This is it, huh? I mean, Tim Walz, this guy was almost the vice president for crying out loud. He was on last night with Rachel Maddow. Sorry, Chris Hayes. I always get them confused. Every time. They got the same haircut and the same glasses. What do you want me to do? MSNBC has to know you can't cast these people back to back. They look the exact same.
Next thing you know, I'll be confused. I'm calling Rachel Hayes.
I know.
Chris Maddow.
I know. It's like, you got the female in Hayes, you got the guy in Maddow. I'm sorry, I did that backwards too. I can't keep them apart. They just mold into the same person. It's like 2 hours. Maybe they try to trick their audience into thinking it's the same person. That's the only thing I can figure. So anyway, Tim Walz is on last night with Hayes, not Maddow, and said this.
I have come to understand what Donald Trump, what pops into his head and he says, he's going to carry it out. Once again, he talked about the tariffs. He talked about, he's going to deport people. And this whole thing with Mr. Abreu Garcia, it's that old wisdom and terrifying is if you're not speaking up for this man, there will be no one left to speak up for you.
I'll take my chances there, Timmy. there's going to be no one left to speak up for you. Yes, you listening right now, or me, I guess, if we don't stand up for this guy in an El Salvadoran prison, John.
The left in these, I don't even know what that means.
I mean, neither.
Right?
It doesn't mean anything.
No, exactly. No, they turn a phrase and then they think they're clever, but the phrase doesn't mean anything. Like Katy Perry was taking up space or something. I'm like, what?
I think his point is Trump's going to throw us all in a Salvadoran prison if we don't take a stand here.
So if I don't speak up for him, nobody speaks up for me.
Yes.
Hey, wait a minute.
It sounds good. It does. It's kind of like the...
If you don't think about it, you let it slide over your head.
Yeah. Well, that's what they're good at, saying words that sound good but mean absolutely nothing. And that's exactly what that was from Tim Walz on Rachel Maddow, Chris Hayes' show last night. That's all it was. Nice words that have no meaning behind them. Now, I'm pretty sure that Tim Walz is going to be okay, and I'm going to be okay, and, you're going to be okay. It's all going to work out. Whether or not this guy's going to be okay, well, that remains to be seen. But the whole, poor wife, back home, babe in the woods routine in Maryland, it doesn't work because now we know this guy had a lot in his past that she was very afraid of. She had multiple reports of basically domestic abuse. But the media is propping up the wife here like they did a couple of days ago. And here's what they had her saying in front of the podium.
As we continue through Holy Week, my heart aches for my husband, who should have been here leading our Easter prayers. Instead, I find myself pleading with the Trump administration and the Bukele administration to stop playing political games with the life of Kilmer. Our family is torn apart during this scary time, and our children miss their dad so much.
That was Abrego Garcia's wife, invoking Holy Week, and he should be here praying with us and the whole thing. Now, listen, people can change, obviously. Redemption is real. We believe all of that. I believe all of that. I won't speak for you. But the narrative that was out there up until yesterday on this guy changed on a dime once some actual information on his background did come out. And that's why neither side is budging right now. Both sides are seeing political benefits from this, whether that's right or wrong. Both sides are seeing political benefits right now. Trump is doubling down on what he believes is a core issue that works for not just his base, but the majority of the American people. And Democrats think that this is the thing that they'll get Trump on. Now, I happen to believe that politically speaking, Trump is right, even if there is a case to be made, as Bill O'Reilly did last night on News Nation, that bringing this guy back, going through the proper legal proceedings that the Supreme Court recommended, and then booting him is the better play. Breaking news out of the sports media world, Lee Corso is retiring from College Game Day. College Game Day just putting up this post 3 minutes ago. For multiple generations, Coach has been the face of our Saturday mornings and the sport that we love. Our friend, our coach, our heart, LC, you will forever be a College Game Day legend. It was time. He has not been the same since he suffered a stroke a few years ago. He has struggled mightily. Frankly, it got to the point of embarrassment for Lee Corso on College Game Day. He is going to be 90 years old in August. Probably should have retired around COVID when he was doing the show remotely in Florida, because obviously as an old guy, he was at high risk. And it just, he has been a shell of what he was. Kirk Herbstreit felt like the kid or the grandkid who's kind of trying to help grandpa keep everything together as he's approaching the very end. That's what it's felt like the last couple of years. It's just felt like elder abuse. And it's just too bad they didn't do this and announce this last season. They could have had a proper send-off. Not like a Derek Jeter tour, but just like if you announce it during the season, you can have a few games where you appreciate the end of Lee Corso's tenure on this legendary show on Saturday mornings during college football season. And instead, it's like a post on X in the middle of April. Hey, Lee, thanks for the memories, buddy.
Yeah, it feels like the first College Game Day now is going to be more like a funeral service almost.
Yeah, it's just, it's possible that Lee Corso was the one driving it and saying, nope, I'm fine. I'm going to hang on one more year. I've got it in me. And finally they had to say, Lee, it's over, buddy. It's done.
We had Biden's agent.
Yeah.
Dr. Jill's helping.
Very similar.
Yeah, that's true. Come on, man. Yeah, that's a very good analogy where somebody finally had to pull the plug and say, this does not make sense for you or us anymore. So maybe Lee was just kind of in this place where he didn't want to give it up, and he kept kind of kicking the can down the road. That's the only thing I could envision, because I'm sure the show would have given him a great send-off. But it was time. You don't want to be the guy or gal that hangs around too long, especially in media, because it never ends well. Now, speaking of the sports front, Fox 4 Kansas City got a hold of Phil LaVota, who was on with Keatsman yesterday, which if you have not heard the interview with Phil LaVota, Independence attorney, lifelong resident, who is willing to replace Frank White on an interim basis if Frank White does get recalled. You got to go back and listen to it on the podcast. Just search Kevin Keatsman. You will find his podcast, and then you'll find the podcast from his show here on KCMO. So that's the interview that you want to find from yesterday's show. It was fantastic. A lot of great information, a lot of great opinions as well, and just foresight into what exactly the process of recalling Frank White and keeping the teams might ultimately look like. So then Fox 4 got a hold of Phil LaVota, and he was on there last night with Jonathan Ketz. And here's part of what that sounded like on Fox 4.
Before we interviewed Gary and Bob at Chapels, we interviewed former Jackson County Democratic Committee Chairman Phil LaVota. He's still supportive of a new Royals ballpark going in that county instead. LaVota believes he could work with Missouri Governor Mike Kehoe on this issue. The governor's office wouldn't comment on Wednesday.
I think Governor Kehoe is more supportive of a North Kansas City site than a downtown KCMO site.
I will say today he is with Frank White as county executive. I agree. If Frank White is out and he has a partner in Jackson County, he already has the infrastructure. They already have a sports authority, and you can put it together. There's been a roadblock for Governor Kehoe, and that's been Jackson County and the executive specifically, not the legislature, but the executive.
Now, here's what I know, though. Phil LaVota does not open up the floodgates to goodwill for Jackson County. And, I met the man yesterday, pleasant, did a great job with Kevin, but I can tell you that with certainty in talking to people, Phil LaVota in there does not magically bring both of these teams to remain in Jackson County. It just doesn't happen. He's got every right to pitch himself, and he should pitch himself. If he's interested and he thinks he's the guy for the job, God bless him. That's great. Maybe he is. I mean, you can't do much worse than what Frank White's done the last few years in this county. So there's only one direction to go. But I'm telling you, this does not create a lot of goodwill from Jeff City's perspective or local Jackson County Truman Sports Complex folks to say, hey, if Phil's the guy, we're all going to be happy campers. That's not the case. So what does that mean? I don't know. What Phil is right about is that everybody on the legislature, not everybody, but I would say the majority, would have interest in being the next county executive. So can you really put any of them in charge on an interim basis? How would that work behind the scenes from a political perspective if the Frank White recall does happen? What do you then do at the top? Having an outsider there is actually a good idea. I don't know if it's Phil or it's somebody else, but having an outsider in that spot is probably a good way to avoid the political infighting that would ultimately take place if Frank does get recalled. Because you know and I know, take people like Manny Abarca on that legislature. They are dying to be county executive. That's why many on Frank's side of the political aisle have gone after him so hard. If Frank is recalled and then we do get an open county executive race sometime in the next year, you will have half a dozen Democrats who want that chair and want that seat, including some people who you probably might not think about who would be very interested in that. Heck, could that be a landing spot for Quinton Lucas when all is said and done? Entirely possible. So the outsider idea is a good one. The question is Phil the guy if we ultimately get there? And it's not even clear that we're going to get there because as Keatsman talked about yesterday with Phil, there's a $150,000 hang up right now. The company that collected a lot of the signatures has to get paid. And, well, trying to figure out who's going to pay them kind of matters. Kind of makes a difference,
I see our next lawsuit coming.
Yeah. Jeez, that's what we need. Another one of those.
They took 25%, did the work, and now they're going, hey.
Yeah.
I'm like, suckers.
Got to get paid. So this morning.
Good luck with that in Jackson County.
Oh, that's true. That's true. This morning, Quentin Lucas was on, and he sounded different to me. He sounded like somebody who was willing to acquiesce to the idea of the Royals not staying in Kansas City, Missouri, despite the fact that for months now he has insisted the Royals and the Chiefs will remain Kansas City, Missouri residents. There was a part of him this morning that just the tone in his voice, not just what he was saying, but the tone was kind of like, I'm exhausted. If keeping the team in Missouri means North Kansas City, I'll do it. And more importantly, if that means keeping the Chiefs where they are, I will absolutely do it. And that's why I asked him a hypothetical this morning on the air, and I didn't know if he was going to answer it. I honestly thought I might get the old Quentin Lucas weave, kind of like the Trump weave, just from a different, political and local perspective. But Trump calls it the weave. Quentin Lucas has the weave as well. I thought I was going to get the weave on this, but he actually gave me a very direct answer. If someone were to say to you, listen, Mr. Mayor, the Royals might go up north, but it guarantees that you keep the Chiefs in Kansas City, Missouri, and in Jackson County versus taking the risk that they may go to the other side of the state line and look out west on I-70, would you sign up for that deal?
Yeah, I would. I mean, look, it's not my preferred outcome, but a few things that I think are important in that. I mean, I actually think if they moved out, and maybe I'm going to sound dramatic, but if they moved out to Wyandotte County, that is long-term bad for the region for a number of different reasons, one of which is that I think that you abandon really the population rich. A lot of people like to perhaps hate on Jackson County, but Blue Springs, Independence, everybody in Eastern Jack, even Lee Summit, that is an important node of our region. Separating or taking out I think a fundamental regional asset from that edge of our region is going to be bad. It's going to be bad for the center of gravity in the Missouri side suburbs, particularly, of course, where a lot of my conservative friends live. So I think it is important to keep activity at the Truman Sports Complex. We also deal with a giant empty ground, of course, if you see both teams leave. I think downtown's obviously preferred. You're close to all the hotels. You're close to walkability, all that sort of stuff. And I think we're all seeing a fundamental challenge in some ways, right, which is that to have a stadium work, you want all those amenities nearby. One of the challenges right now with the downtown Kansas City location, although wonderful to all of us as normal people, but it's the question of how much can the Royals actually own and control. Crown Center, of course, is owned by the Hall family interests, Hallmark, and others, and so they can capture a lot of those revenues. I get why, and this is, I think, why you continue to see that campus discussion. Because, of course, Royals want ownership interest in hotels, a lot of the other things that helps generate revenue for the team. I don't actually think at this point it's really a leadership question. It's a money. It's how they think they can generate best for the Royals and the tax incentives at issue. And I certainly prefer that all being in Missouri. And so I'm with my colleagues in the legislature on that one.
Notice how he said it. Yeah, I would. It's kind of like when you come to that realization on something that you don't want to be true. Even though you know the alternative is not all that bad of an option, you just kind of had your hopes up for something else. It's kind of how he sounded there with that response. Yeah. Because in the end, the Chiefs are the crown jewel. And you definitely don't want to be the mayor who lost the Chiefs. Even if you keep the Royals, you'll be known as the mayor who lost the Chiefs. He knows that. And that's why he's willing to, and I was somewhat surprised that he would do that, admit, if losing the Royals to the Northland means I keep the Chiefs in this town, I'll take it today. And I knew that was going to be the answer deep down. I just didn't think he would say it out loud. 913-408-7957. Were you? Because I never know what I'm going to get, right? Sometimes I'm getting the direct answer. Sometimes I'm not. 913-408-7957. We have our caller of the day who was just outstanding on the motherhood front All coming up. Kevin Keatsman uncanceled at 10 o'clock.